I'm about to tell you something that will disturb you. You've been unconsciously training people to disrespect you. Every day, every conversation, every interaction. Right now, as you watch this, someone in your life has already written you off. Not because you failed publicly, not because you made some catastrophic mistake, but because of something far more insidious: the quiet erosion of your presence, the invisible leak of your power, the death of your respect, happening in plain sight, while you remain completely unaware. If something inside you recognized the warning, "You'll lose respect," then you already know this erosion has begun in your own life. This warning isn't a threat. It's a diagnosis. And in the last segment, I'll provide you the antidote, the unspoken Machiavellian laws that will help you rebuild your lost respect and value without asking for permission, sympathy, or approval. The shocking truth is that respect isn't lost through dramatic failures. It's bled away through tiny surrenders you make dozens of times every single day. And you're already losing it through micro-behaviors so subtle you don't even realize you're doing them. This is exactly what Machiavelli feared most. Not hatred, not opposition, but irrelevance. The silent transition from threat to afterthought. Because hatred means you still matter. But being overlooked, that means you've been weighed, measured, and found powerless. But here's what separates you from the masses who will remain forever overlooked. You're about to learn the exact psychological triggers that cause people to unconsciously downgrade your status. More importantly, you're going to discover how to reverse this process so completely that people will instinctively adjust their behavior around you without you ever having to demand it. The truth is brutal, but it's also liberating, because once you see these patterns, you can never unsee them. But first, let me ask you something that might sting. When was the last time someone genuinely feared disappointing you? When was the last time your silence made someone uncomfortable? When was the last time you entered a room and felt the energy shift in your favor? If you're struggling to answer those questions, then what I'm about to share isn't just theory. It's surgery. Psychological surgery to remove the behaviors that are bleeding away your respect, one interaction at a time. The invisible hemorrhaging of power. Here's what most men don't understand about respect. It doesn't disappear through scandal or dramatic failure. It hemorrhages through micro-behaviors, through the way you stand, the way you pause, the way you react to tension. Every gesture is either training people to take you seriously or conditioning them to dismiss you. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He knew that power isn't just about position, it's about presence. And presence isn't about being loud or aggressive. It's about being impossible to ignore, impossible to manipulate, impossible to reduce. But here's the brutal truth that's about to change everything. You are unconsciously teaching people to disrespect you. Every time you over-explain, every time you fill an uncomfortable silence, every time you laugh at a joke that was actually teasing you, you're not being friendly, you're not being relatable. You're broadcasting weakness in a language that everyone speaks fluently, even if they don't realize it. And the most dangerous part? This conditioning happens so gradually that by the time you notice it, the damage is already done. Your word carries less weight. Your presence creates less tension. Your absence goes unnoticed. You've become background noise in your own life. The first fatal leak, the disease of premature revelation. Let me start with something that's probably happening in your life right now. You have a goal, a plan, a vision for something you want to accomplish. And what do? You tell people about it. You share your intentions. You paint the picture of what you're building. You think you're inspiring them, You think you're being transparent. But Machiavelli would watch this and see something entirely different. You're seeking validation before you've earned results. Machiavelli understood this psychological trap perfectly. Every time you announce your intentions, you create expectation without proof. The listener's mind starts a countdown. They're not rooting for you. They're unconsciously tracking whether you'll deliver. And when you don't deliver exactly as promised, exactly when promised, you don't just fail to meet expectations. You actively subtract from your credibility. This is why powerful people move in silence. They don't announce their plans. They don't seek approval for their visions. They don't need the energy of others' enthusiasm to fuel their actions. They simply act, and when the results are undeniable, they let others do the talking. The moment you need to talk about what you're going to do, you've already revealed that you're not the type of person who simply does it. Think about the last time you told someone about a goal you didn't achieve. Notice how the conversation felt different the next time you saw them. There was a subtle shift, wasn't there? A small erosion of their confidence in your word. That's not failure. That's the slow assassination of your authority. But this is just the beginning, because there's an even subtler way you're bleeding authority, through the very words you use to explain yourself. The second leak. The compulsion to justify your existence. Here's something that might hit close to home. You over-explain yourself. Not just occasionally, but as a reflex. Someone misunderstands your intent, and you immediately launch into clarification. Someone questions your decision, and you feel compelled to walk them through your reasoning. Someone seems confused by your behavior, and you can't resist explaining yourself. You think you're being helpful. You think you're preventing misunderstandings. But what you're actually doing is far more damaging. You're telling the world that you don't trust your actions to speak for themselves. You're announcing that I'll do anything when it comes to maintaining my reputation, my relationships, my friendships. Let me paint a picture of your daily office routine. You're in a meeting. You make a statement. Instead of letting it stand, you immediately follow up with justification. The reason I say that is because, or what I mean by that is, or let me clarify what I'm thinking. Congratulations. You just told everyone in the room that you don't believe your own words are strong enough to stand alone. Machiavelli never explained himself. If someone misunderstood his intentions, he would remain silent and let his results destroy their assumptions. If someone questioned his methods, he would demonstrate their effectiveness rather than defend their logic. Because here's what happens when you over-explain. You validate other people's right to question you. You establish that their confusion is your problem to solve. You place yourself in the position of needing their understanding rather than demanding their attention. The man who constantly justifies his choices is unconsciously admitting that his choices might be wrong. People's brains work like this. If he's explaining something unprompted, there must be something wrong with it. If he's justifying his position without being challenged, his position must be weak. If he's clarifying what seemed clear, it probably wasn't as solid as it appeared. You've created a problem by trying to solve one that didn't exist. And once people sense that uncertainty, once they realize you're seeking their approval rather than commanding their respect, they begin to treat you like someone who needs permission to exist. Your explanations become proof of your insecurity, not evidence of your thoughtfulness. But here's where it gets even more subtle. Because there's a behavior that seems positive, even charming, that's actually one of the fastest ways to signal submissiveness. The third leak, the desperate performance of likability. This one might be the most painful to recognize. You're trying too hard to be liked. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You agree with opinions you don't share. You smile too quickly, nod too enthusiastically, and react too eagerly to everything around you. You think you're being socially skilled, likable, easy to be around. But what you're actually doing is training everyone present to see you as the person who bends, who accommodates, who can be counted on to smooth over tension rather than create it. Machiavelli would observe this and see something chilling, a man advertising his willingness to be walked over. Machiavelli understood that likability and respect are not just different, they're often mutually exclusive. The man who is desperate to be liked will bend himself into whatever shape others prefer. He will laugh at jokes that subtly mock him. He will agree with positions that diminish him. He will smile through disrespect rather than risk social tension. And here's the cruel irony. The more you chase likability, the less likable you become. Because people can smell desperation. They can sense when someone is performing rather than simply being. And that performance, no matter how skilled, broadcasts one clear message: I am not confident in my own value. True respect comes from controlled presence, not constant emotional availability. The man who withholds his reactions, who smiles slowly, who laughs selectively, he creates mystery. And mystery generates respect because it forces others to project depth onto you, rather than reading you like an open book. But this connects to an even more damaging pattern, one that most people do dozens of times per day without realizing how it's eroding their authority. The fourth leak, the poison of reflexive apologies. Listen to yourself for the next hour. Count how many times you say, I'm sorry for things that don't actually warrant an apology. Sorry, I'm late. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, I just had a thought. Sorry, can I add something? The word sorry has become so automatic that you probably don't even notice how often you use it. But every person listening does notice, and their subconscious is keeping score. Each of these phrases seems polite. They seem considerate. But Machiavelli would hear something entirely different in every one of them. I place myself beneath you. He would reckon, this is a man who believes he needs permission to exist in his own life. When you apologize reflexively, you're not being courteous. You're establishing hierarchy. You're telling the world that your presence is an imposition. Your thoughts are interruptions. Your time is less valuable than theirs. The man who constantly apologizes is unconsciously asking permission to exist in spaces he already belongs. The psychological programming is insidious. When you apologize for things that don't require apology, you're teaching people to see your presence as an imposition rather than a value. You're not late because you're disrespectful. You're late because life happened. You're not asking a question because you're stupid. You're asking because you need information. You're not bothering someone by speaking. You're engaging in normal human communication. Watch how differently people respond to the same actions when framed differently. Sorry, I'm late versus traffic was unexpected. Sorry to interrupt versus I need to address this. Sorry, quick question versus I have a question. The content is the same, but the energy is completely different. The first version asks for permission to exist. The second version assumes the right to exist. And people unconsciously respond to that assumption by either granting or denying that right. Powerful people don't over-apologize. They acknowledge when something genuinely needs to be corrected, then move forward. They don't grovel. They don't seek emotional comfort through self-deprecation. They adjust their behavior without diminishing their presence. And here's what happens when you stop apologizing for things that don't require apologies. People begin to take you more seriously. Your words carry more weight because they're not constantly prefaced with submissions. Your presence becomes more solid because it's not constantly undermining itself. But there's a deeper pattern here, one that reveals itself in how you handle the spaces between words. The fifth leak, the cowardice of filled silence. This is something that's probably happening in your conversations right now. Someone says something that creates tension. There's a pause, an uncomfortable silence. And what do? And within seconds, you step in. You fill the gap. You smooth things over. You make everyone more comfortable. You're making a joke, asking a question, making an observation, anything to get the conversation moving again. You think you're being helpful. You think you're showing social intelligence. But what you're actually doing is something far more damaging. You're training every room you enter to expect you to collapse under pressure first. Machiavelli understood that silence is not empty space. It's pressure. And the person who can hold that pressure longest controls the room. When you fill silence too quickly, you're announcing that you're less comfortable with discomfort than everyone else in the room. Think about this. Why are you so afraid of silence? What do you think will happen if you don't fill it? The answer reveals everything about your relationship with power. You're afraid that silence means you're failing socially, that people will judge you, that you'll be seen as awkward or uncomfortable. But here's the psychological flip. When you consistently fill silence, you train people to expect you to do the work of managing their comfort. You become the person who relieves tension rather than the person who creates productive tension. Think about the most powerful people you know. Notice how they handle pauses. They don't rush to fill them. They don't explain away tension. They let silence do the work. They understand that the person who speaks first in a moment of tension is usually the person who has the least power. And here's what happens when you learn to hold silence. People start adjusting their behavior around you. Your presence becomes more impactful because it's not constantly leaking energy through unnecessary explanations. But silence is just one form of pressure. There's another kind of pressure that reveals everything about your respect level, how you handle being tested. The sixth leak, the transparency of emotional reactivity. This one might be the most revealing. You react too visibly to small disrespects. The moment someone can predict your emotional response, they own your behavior. Someone makes a comment that stings. Maybe it's a subtle dig, maybe it's outright disrespect, maybe it's just thoughtless. Your face changes, your body language shifts. You get defensive, or you overcompensate with humor, or you withdraw slightly. The reaction is small, quick, but it's there, and everyone sees it. Machiavelli would observe this and know immediately. This man can be controlled through his emotions. The moment people can see your ego get bruised, you've lost all power in the interaction. Machiavelli would say that the man who can be emotionally baited is already owned. Because once people know they can affect you, once they can see your buttons and watch you react when they press them, they've discovered how to control you. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming emotionally unpredictable. When someone disrespects you, they should have no idea how you're going to respond. They should see only stillness, calculation, and control. The man who cannot be read cannot be manipulated. And here's the counterintuitive truth. The less you react to disrespect, the more people respect you. When you stop reacting emotionally to small provocations, people start taking you more seriously during big ones. Because emotional control in the face of provocation signals something that everyone recognizes instinctively: strength. But emotional control connects to a more specific behavior, one that immediately signals your position in any social hierarchy. The seventh leak: the desperation of repetition. Pay attention to this pattern in your conversations. When you repeat yourself after being ignored, you're announcing that your words don't carry weight. You make a point in a group conversation. Nobody responds. Maybe they didn't hear you. Maybe they're processing. Maybe they're ignoring you. So you say it again, maybe louder, maybe rephrased, maybe with more explanation. You're trying to make sure your contribution isn't lost. But what you've actually done is demonstrate that you need validation to feel heard, rather than commanding attention to be heard. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately. This is a man who chases his own words rather than making others chase them. The man who repeats himself after being ignored is announcing that he's chasing attention rather than commanding it. The psychology is devastating. When you repeat yourself after being ignored, you're confirming that being ignored is acceptable. You're showing that your response to disrespect is to try harder rather than to withdraw your attention. You're training people to know that ignoring you carries no consequences. Powerful people don't repeat themselves. They make others regret not listening the first time. They simply observe who failed to catch the weight of what they said, and then they say nothing more. That silence becomes its own form of punishment. The people who ignored you begin to feel it. They register the shift. They realize something important just happened that they missed. And next time, they won't need a repetition. They'll lean in the first time. Your words should feel rare, not repeated. This final leak is the most subtle and the most devastating. The eighth leak: the hunger for visual validation. This is something you might not have noticed about yourself. You seek eye contact for validation. When you're speaking, you scan the room looking for nods, smiles, signs of agreement. You watch people's faces to see if they're engaged. You adjust your energy based on their reactions. You think you're reading the room. You think you're being socially aware. But what you're actually doing is something that broadcasts lower status. You're proving that you need their approval to continue. Machiavelli would see this and understand. This man is seeking permission to exist in this interaction. The psychology of eye contact is more complex than most people realize. Constant eye contact doesn't signal confidence. It signals need. You're looking for cues about how you're being received, whether you're saying the right thing, whether you're being accepted or rejected. True power doesn't look to be seen. It looks through people, or it doesn't look at all. When you constantly seek eye contact for validation, you're unconsciously communicating that you're unsure of your position, that you need permission to be present. The person who others want to be seen by owns the room. And here's what happens when you stop seeking validation through eye contact. People start working harder to get your attention. They start adjusting their behavior to earn your gaze. You become the one whose attention has value, rather than the one who's desperately seeking it. But here's where everything changes, because understanding how you lose respect is only half the battle. The other half is learning how to reclaim it. The path back to respect. If you've recognized yourself in these patterns, if you've seen your own behaviors reflected in these leaks, then you're already ahead of 90% of men who will live their entire lives wondering why they never command the respect they deserve. The path back to respect doesn't involve becoming more aggressive, more demanding, or more vocal. It involves becoming more strategic, more controlled, and more selective about where you invest your energy. Respect is not earned through effort. It's reclaimed through withdrawal. The Machiavellian reversal, reclaiming your authority power, is not taken from you. It's given away, and what was given can be taken back. The beauty of understanding how you lose respect is that it reveals exactly how to regain it. Every behavior that erodes authority can be reversed. Every pattern that diminishes your presence can be transformed into one that amplifies it. But the reversal requires something most people are unwilling to do. You have to become comfortable with being misunderstood. Machiavelli knew that the price of respect is often the loss of being liked. When you stop over-explaining, some people will think you're unclear. When you stop filling silence, some people will think you're awkward. When you stop being constantly available, some people will think you're selfish. Here's how the reversal works in practice. The first reconstruction: strategic scarcity. If you've been too available, too present, too eager to be involved in every conversation and every moment, then the first step to reclaiming respect is counterintuitive. Become scarce. Not absent, not cold, not angry, but selectively available. Stop responding immediately to every message. Stop explaining every decision. Stop showing up to every gathering. Stop making yourself the most reliable presence in every room. Familiarity doesn't breed contempt. It breeds irrelevance. When you become strategically scarce, people begin to recalibrate their perception of you. Your presence starts to feel earned rather than expected. Your time begins to carry weight rather than convenience. This isn't about playing games. It's about understanding that value is largely determined by rarity. And if you've made yourself too common, too predictable, too available, then scarcity becomes your path back to significance. The second reconstruction: precise correction. When someone disrespects you now, you don't overreact. You don't get emotional. You don't seek revenge. Instead, you do something far more powerful. You correct their behavior with surgical precision. If someone interrupts you, you don't raise your voice. You pause. You look at them. You let the silence linger just long enough to make everyone in the room uncomfortable. Then you continue exactly where you left off. If someone mocks you in public, you don't defend yourself. You ask them to repeat what they said, but slower. You make them own their words. You turn their aggression into awkwardness. True power corrects behavior without changing tone. This is how you rebuild respect, not through confrontation, but through the controlled redirection of social energy. You don't fight disrespect. You make it expensive for others to offer it. The third reconstruction: weaponized silence. In a world where everyone feels compelled to have an opinion, to respond immediately, to fill every pause with words, the man who can hold silence becomes immediately powerful. Start using silence as a tool. When someone asks you a question, don't answer immediately. When someone challenges you, don't defend immediately. When someone insults you, don't react immediately. Let the silence do the work. Let the tension build. Let other people become uncomfortable with the space you're not filling. Silence in the hands of a man who knows how to use it becomes a weapon. People will start watching their words around you. They'll begin to brace themselves when you speak. They'll give more weight to your opinions because they're not constantly competing with verbal clutter. The fourth reconstruction: emotional fortress. You must rebuild your emotional baseline from scratch. No more being readable. No more being predictable. No more letting people see exactly what you're feeling and use that information against you. This doesn't mean becoming a robot. It means becoming emotionally strategic. Your reactions should be choices, not reflexes. Your energy should be deployed, not leaked. In anger, remain calm. In excitement, remain measured. In sadness, remain composed. Your emotional consistency becomes your armor, and people will begin to treat you with the caution that emotional unpredictability commands. The man who cannot be emotionally manipulated cannot be controlled. The final installation, the Machiavellian presence. Here's what separates the men who command respect from those who beg for it. Presence is not about being seen, it's about being felt. When you enter a room, you don't scan it desperately for acknowledgement. You don't seek eye contact for validation. You don't adjust your energy based on others' reactions. You simply exist with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their own value. Your words become rare, and therefore precious. Your attention becomes selective and therefore valuable. Your approval becomes difficult to earn, and therefore meaningful. You don't demand respect. You simply move in a way that makes disrespect feel impossible. This is the final transformation. From being someone who needs others' energy to being someone whose energy others need. From being someone who reacts to the room to being someone the room reacts to. The point of no return. There comes a moment in every man's life when he must choose between comfort and respect, between being liked and being taken seriously, between fitting in and standing out. Most men choose comfort. They choose the path of least resistance. They choose to be agreeable rather than authoritative. And they spend their lives wondering why their words carry no weight, why their presence creates no tension, why their absence goes unnoticed. But you have a different choice now. You can choose to implement these principles. You can choose to stop the leaks. You can choose to rebuild your presence from the ground up. The question is not whether you're capable of commanding respect. The question is whether you're willing to stop seeking everyone's approval long enough to earn it. Your transformation begins. If you've made it this far, if you've recognized yourself in these patterns, if something inside you has awakened to the possibility of a different way of being, then you're already beginning to change. But knowledge without action is just entertainment, and transformation without commitment is just fantasy. Choose 3 of these principles and implement them this week. Not all of them, not perfectly, just 3. Let people notice the shift. Let them recalibrate their perception of you. Let them wonder what changed. Because the most powerful transformations happen not through dramatic gestures, but through the accumulation of small, consistent improvements in how you carry yourself through the world. The man who commands respect doesn't announce his power. He simply moves through life in a way that makes others unconsciously adjust their behavior around him. He becomes the energy that others orbit, not the satellite seeking someone else's attention. Your respect was never lost. It was just temporarily hidden beneath behaviors that made you dismissible. Now you know how to reclaim it. Now you have the tools. Now you understand the invisible dynamics that separate the men who are taken seriously from those who are not. The only question remaining is this: are you ready to become impossible to ignore? If this video has shown you something about yourself that you needed to see, if it's given you a blueprint for reclaiming the respect you deserve, then subscribe for more content on the psychology of power and presence. Because understanding these dynamics is just the beginning. The real work starts now. The real transformation begins when you turn off this video and start moving through the world differently. Stop seeking respect. Start commanding it.